2015 Madison Cup Debate Tournament. This year we had one of our strongest fields, and you're about to see 6 of the top teams from the tournament debate in the final round. First, I'd like to extend some thank yous. First of all, thank you to the audience for coming. It's an audience-based debate, so without all of you, what we're doing up here would not have the same impact. Thanks to the JMU debaters. We had JMU debaters debate today, but also help get all the debates started, walk people all over campus who had to go places, clean up trash, pretty much do everything that I asked them for. So let's give a round of applause to them. Also, thank you to our preliminary judges who you can find on the back of your program. These are community members, JMU faculty and staff who took time out of their busy schedules to come and judge today. And without the tournament, without them, we couldn't hold the tournament. So thank you to them. Also, thank you to the Madison Cup Committee. Paul Mabry, Lindsay Shook, Kathy Clark, Pete Bazumic, and Aaron Nolan. They helped create the posters, the programs you see. They looked over stipend applications to help teams traveling here who needed to, and pretty much did everything to help keep me sane over the last couple weeks organizing this event. So let's have a round of applause for them. Also, thank you to Bill Wilson from the Madison Institutes. Bill reserved all the rooms, they provide all the money for the food, the programs, all of that sort of thing. So let's have a hand for Bill. Also, thank you to the Arthur N. Root Foundation. The Root Foundation provides a $52,000 grant every year to host the Madison Cup. And what that goes to is stipends for some of the teams to travel here, a public debate course that we teach each fall, plus prize money for all of the debaters and teams that you see behind us. The top team at the tournament will receive $5,000 for their debate program, and the top debaters who win this tournament will receive $2,000, and every debater on the stage will receive at least $1,000. So it's a very generous contribution. Let's have a round of applause for them. The format of this debate is a long table debate, which is a little bit different from a lot of debates you've probably seen before. In a long table debate, there are 3 schools representing each side of the resolution, which means that when the judges deliberate, they may decide that a team from the affirmative finished first, and a team from the negative finished second, all the way down, right? So it means that while they're competing against the people on the opposite side of the topic, they're also competing against the people who are arguing the same side as them. And part of the reason this format is interesting and works in a democratic society is that even when we agree with people, we don't necessarily agree with them on everything. And I think this topic really does a lot to highlight that. The topic today that they'll be debating is that this House believes that the United States should legalize and regulate marijuana for recreational use. Your final round judges are John Humphreys, CEO of Fairhaven Residential Services, JMU President John Alger, Kai Degner, representing the Harrisonburg City Council, Dave Urso, the Dean of Life Sciences and Human Services at Blue Ridge Community College, Abe Shearer, also representing the Harrisonburg City Council, and Shelley James, representing the law offices of Shelley James. Now, we expect you all to be involved as well in 2 ways. First of all, inside your programs, there's a ballot for you to vote at the end of the debate for the team that you thought did the best job. And when we say the team, we want you to pick a school that you thought did the best job. And that school will receive some very nice JMU debate t-shirts. Also, at the end of the debate, we'll invite the audience down to make floor speeches or ask questions of our competitors. And this is a chance for you to be involved, and our moderator will then pick our moderator and time period will pick what they thought was the best floor speech to also receive a nice JMU debate t-shirt. Our moderator for tonight is Dr. John Halsey from the Political Science Department. And without any further ado, I'll hand it over to him.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you all for coming, as well as, most of all, I'd like to thank the judges and certainly our competitors for coming. We're all looking forward to an exciting and informative debate. The timekeeper today is going to be Cecilia Sercha, so you'll see and hear her banging the gavel and managing things as we go. So without further ado, we'll call forward the first affirmative debater, Sean Leonard from Rutgers University.
Before I begin my time, I want to echo the sentiments of thanks on behalf of not only Rutgers University, but also the American Parliamentary Debate Association. That in debate in America, it's oftentimes that everyone likes to stand up for discourse, but there are very few people that put their money where their mouth is, and the Arthur N. Root Foundation and James Madison University as a whole have done that, and we are very grateful. With that, I shall begin. Honorable panel and members of the audience, Albert Einstein once said that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. We have attempted and attempted and attempted to illegalize marijuana and enforce the bans that we have passed for nearly 80 years now. An 80-year history marred by incarceration, by discrimination, and abject failure. That at that point, we must stop being insane and take on the righteous course of action that will allow for more money to be dedicated towards social programs, to start fighting and combating discrimination in the United States, and to ensure that the right of autonomy for each and every individual citizen is protected. What do we defend on side affirmative? We defend a full legalization of marijuana and regulation by the United States government and the FDA. That independent licensed contractors will be able to sell it to any citizen above 21 years of age who chooses to do so, and that we should have the right to do so. There are two fundamental issues in this debate round. The first one is about philosophy specifically. That we think that every person, by virtue of being a person, has consented into the social contract at which the United States government must abide. In these circumstances, we believe that that social contract must then say that people have a right to autonomy, that they are the ones who should decide what to do with their bodies and their beings, and they should be able to fully consent into harm if they want to. In these circumstances, it is ridiculous to think that the government should simply ban something and prevent you from doing something simply because there is a potential harm to that. That because of the fact that fast food is also something that could potentially have a harm to you, that tobacco is something that could potentially have a harm to you, that alcohol is something that could potentially have a harm to you, that anything you decide to do in your life, such as skydiving, riding a bike, or driving a car, could potentially result in harm. In these circumstances, we believe it is your right to decide whether or not that is the right decision, not that of the government, and the government should defer to freedom. But the second argument that we're going to present is about practicality. That even if you don't believe in freedom, which would be a surprise to me personally, if you believe in practicality and that of societal impact, that the other side of this debate will come up and say, but there are social problems with these issues. The way we deal with social problems is not by shoving them under the rug and calling addicts criminals and making a problem as something that is a criminal offense. Instead, what we shall do is bring it into the open light, to fund education programs, to tell people about the harms of marijuana and the dangers. I think there are three specific practical benefits that we can gain on our side that they cannot even claim to touch. The first one is a revenue system for education programs, criminal justice programs, public defenders, and all of these things that we all consider good. That if we were to simply allow for this to be legal, that individual states would be able to get so much revenue that they would be able to justify even more of these programs. The statistic I shall use is that in Colorado, they raised nearly $76 million in revenue for programs like these. $76 million that can pay for nearly 4,000 students to go to college like you and have the opportunities that you have. Or nearly 900 police officers to defend and protect the people who require that protection. Or nearly 3,000 public defendants to protect people from the coercive power of the state. But the second benefit I can claim is that we can take money away from international cartels and inner city gangs that will use the money that could be put towards education programs for guns trafficking, for human trafficking, to destabilize a country that is our neighbor and that we should help and protect. We should not stand idly by as these countries are ravaged, as our inner cities are ravaged, and our very efforts to reform and make our society better are undercut by the actions and illegalization of marijuana. But the third and final argument that we present is that it solves for a huge potential of racism. That despite the fact that people who are white and people who are black use marijuana at nearly the same rate, someone who is black will be incarcerated and arrested for that nearly 4 times more is likely in these circumstances. That while we do not claim this will solve for racism, it is an incremental step, and we should not stand idly by as this injustice continues.
Thank you, Sean. Next, I call Ben Marks from the College of William and Mary.
Thank you. So before I begin, I'm going to do the same thing that everyone else up here does, which is go through and thank a whole lot of people. The first person that I want to thank is my partner Venu for coming to this tournament with me for the second straight year. You've been a wonderful partner, and I'm so glad to be up here in finals with you today. Thanks. I'd also like to thank Jerry and Aaron, the other team from William & Mary, who we dragged here with us today. Move that back a little bit. I'm really glad that you guys came here with us. Aaron and Jerry, you guys are mentors to me in so many different ways. All right, it's gonna happen. We're just gonna go with this. So, and lastly, I'd like to thank Mike Davis and the entire JMU debate team for putting this entire Madison Cup on. I'm really excited to be here. I'm glad that I get the chance to debate in front of so many people. So with that said, I'd like to get right into it. No government can legislate in a vacuum. No government should make policy decisions without understanding the full impact of those decisions on its people. And though the negative side of this debate recognizes that the current United States policy towards marijuana is flawed, in the words of Leo Tolstoy, wrong does not cease to be wrong because the majority share in it. For these reasons, I'm proud to stand before you today and negate the resolution that the United States should legalize and regulate marijuana for recreational use. Before I get into the arguments that I'm going to present to you in this speech today, I want to talk a little bit about the ground and implementation that the negative side of this debate is going to defend. Because when Sean gets up here and tells you that we're going to be throwing countless individuals into jail, that we're going to be incarcerating and putting away individuals in an extremely racist fashion, that's not something that we're actually going to do. What the negative side of the debate is going to defend today is a system of decriminalization, where individuals who possess small quantities of marijuana are fined small amounts of money, similar to what you would get for a speeding ticket or a traffic violation, that while maintaining the illegality of marijuana, does not end up with any of these individuals being placed in prison or being incarcerated. The second thing that we want to talk about is that we're perfectly fine with the use of marijuana for medicinal purposes. We're only against the legalization of marijuana for recreational use. With that said, I've got three main points for you today. The first thing that I want to talk about is the negative medical effects of marijuana. So, a Duke University research team found that there was a correlation between marijuana use and a drop in the IQ of individuals who used marijuana. They found that moderate use of marijuana led to a 8-degree drop in IQ, while individuals in a placebo treatment received absolutely no change to their IQ, and that this correlation with IQ was stronger the more heavily the individuals in question used marijuana. Individuals who use marijuana are 3 times more likely to develop schizophrenia, and among individuals who commit suicide, their marijuana use rate is 8 times higher that of the general population. Moreover, individuals who use marijuana are very likely to become dependent on the drug. 16% of adolescents who use marijuana begin showing signs of dependency, which is comparable to a 15% dependency rate for other drugs that we consider perfectly acceptable to keep illegal, like cocaine. I don't think it's okay for the affirmative side of the debate to come up here and tell you that there are going to be these contradictory standards on what we choose to make legal and illegal in this round. But the second argument I want to advance for you today is why effective rehabilitation programs for substance abuse addicts require marijuana staying illegal. So recognize that in the status quo, we have a very difficult time mandating individuals to attend rehabilitation programs for drugs that are legal, like alcohol. Because these individuals who are alcoholics, who have serious substance abuse problems, can't be state mandated to attend things like rehabilitation programs until after they commit a crime. They can't be forced to go into rehab until after they assault someone else, or until after they've killed someone as a result of a drunk driving accident. We would tell you that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, and that it's imperative that the government be able to mandate individuals who are addicted to substance abuse to attend rehabilitation programs before they harm other individuals and not afterwards. And the only way to do this is to keep the possession of marijuana illegal. The last argument that I want to advance for you today in this round is that the use of marijuana will skyrocket after it becomes legal. So the first thing that we're going to do here is just present a little bit of very straightforward price analysis. In Colorado, after marijuana was legalized, the price dropped to 1/4 of the price that exists in Virginia today, about $50 an ounce in Colorado, compared to more than $200 an ounce for really cheap stuff in Harrisonburg. Don't ask me how I know that. So, we have to recognize that the problem exists when poor individuals now have the ability to consume large amounts of marijuana, become addicted to the substance, and have all of these harmful medical side effects we believe the government should legislate against. We're very proud to oppose.
Thank you, Ben. Next up to argue in the affirmative is Kurt Falk from Rutgers University.
Yeah, so before I begin, this is my first time ever being in Harrisonburg, Virginia. I'm from Rutgers, which I go there, but it's not the prettiest campus. This is by far one of the most beautiful campuses I've ever seen. I really hope Rutgers opens up a satellite campus. Unfortunately, though, this will probably be one of the last tournaments I ever do, so I may not get to go here again, so I hope to make it count. But thank you everyone for convening this. So with that said, I'm going to go right into my speech. So I think what we need to understand as we go through this round is the worlds that exist on each side of the house, on each side of the issue. Because on both sides, people are still going to buy marijuana. We have the prohibition side where people are already buying marijuana like they do in the present day, and we have the legalized side where we can do it safer with regulations. At the point that both people will have to defend a world where people are going to continue to have access to marijuana, what you need to decide this round, what you need to decide policy on, is the policy that means that when you get that marijuana, it is the safest that it can be, it does not fund bad actions, and that it creates the greatest benefits for society overall. That's how we're going to look at this round, and I think that's how both sides need to continue to look at it. So let's look at these worlds. Let's look at the safer world that we end up getting on affirmative. Because what's so important about having legalized regulation versus decriminalization, like Negative is going to say? What happens is that when you only decriminalize, but do not regulate it, do not have democratic regulatory bodies going over the crop that you're selling for consumption, that's how you have the biggest harms with marijuana. The biggest harms that come from smoking marijuana come when it's laced with other things, when it's produced in a manner that is extremely dangerous. Only on our side of the house do we reduce the biggest harm that they're going to continue to cite on their side of the house. We think that's huge. That alone will save lives. That alone will create a better consumer crop in both sides of the house. But what's one of the other big harms of marijuana that we have to deal with? The idea of how people sometimes get addicted and they need to get rehabilitated because of that. What do we create on side app as a mechanism for that? When we regulate it, when we legalize it, we are able to tax it and get revenue. We can use that revenue for the education programs that prevent people from abusing marijuana. We can use it to create better training for other good things within society, like education, like my partner said. We can use the $76 million in Colorado for so many different benefits. Do you know what Negative can never give you on their side? They can never give you that mechanism for how they'll get the revenue to enact the policy that they need to create satisfactory marijuana policy that does not harm the people that continue to consume it. We think that is extremely important. Because guess what? Guess who's selling marijuana on their side of the house? It's illegal cartels, it's inner city gangs. When you're filling out that ballot today, the question that you have to ask yourself is, who do I want to be regulating the crop of marijuana within the United States? Do I want it to be a violent, illegal cartel with no oversight? Or do I want it to be a democratically elected body that has regulatory measures that everyone agrees to and are vetted? We think the answer there is incredibly clear. Yes.
I don't think that, oh, there we go. Regarding regulations, the FDA is already pretty overburdened when it comes to things like food. We see food contamination all the time. How is the FDA going to regulate when some shops can carry like 50 strands of different kinds of marijuana across thousands of shops?
Maybe the FDA is a little overburdened, but remember there's a comparative debate. Who do you think is doing a better job regulating marijuana? A burdened FDA or a Mexican drug cartel? When you think about that, I'd rather have an overburdened FDA, but more importantly, we create the mechanism to take away some of that burden. Now we can use the funds that we get from the revenue to alleviate, hire more staff, and make a more effective crop. But the last thing I want to talk about is this idea of the overall philosophy of what it means, of what we should be considering. That before we talk about policy, we shouldn't do that first. We should instead think, what are the values of the society that we want to live in? What are the values that we want to uphold by that policy? What we propose on side app is this right to autonomy, this right to have freedom against the government itself. We think this is hugely important, that the government should have an incredibly high burden before it takes away rights from you, before it takes freedom from you. I don't think they can ever meet the burden that marijuana meets that, especially when it's definitely such a personal thing in the harm itself. But finally, when we're actually talking about harms within society, who harms more people? On their side of the house, they continue to give the cartels their biggest cash crop. We take that away on our side of the house. We have a safer society on affirmative, we have better drug policy on affirmative, and we actually create real mechanisms. They're going to come up here and read all these facts for why marijuana is bad. If you think that marijuana is bad, if you buy any of their analysis on the health effects, you must pick us up because we give you the mechanism to solve that. Thank you.
Thank you, Kurt. Next up, from the College of Women, William and Mary, speaking in the negative, Venukata.
So I'm apparently supposed to thank people, so I'd like to thank everyone I've ever met for everything. Oh, and Ben too. So the way I want to talk about this round is by not lying to you. I'm not going to stand here at James Madison University on 420 and tell you marijuana is the worst thing and will give you all cancer and will give you all AIDS. But what I want to tell you is what happens when the abuse happens and why we think a decriminalized system where the government can still take protective action is better than a legalized system, and it is better for the least advantaged of our society, those who do not have the wealth to access rehabilitation programs, to access the social safety nets. So what I want to first talk about is how we approach this round, because it's not simply from the rich individuals that can approach marijuana as a recreational activity and have the ability to engage in this pursuit. What Ben told you, my partner, is that the price of marijuana crashes when you legalize it because you can now produce it legally wholesale. The price isn't marked up because the cartel has to take the precautions of how it's going to market the good over the border, how it's going to get around the DEA, how it's going to shoot the cop that's going to try and stop it. Why this is problematic is it means that poor individuals have unlimited access to this. What we think is the problem here isn't simply that they are doing it. The problem is that some people do have adverse reactions when they have unlimited marijuana dependency. Look, not everyone is going to have terrible reactions. Not everyone is going to have terrible dependency. But it is the case that the people who are 8 times more likely when they attempt to end their own lives that they are using marijuana are not the people that are satisfied in the status quo, are not the people that are helped in the status quo. What do we want to do? The status quo is what the affirmative says. It is a situation where police unfairly target minorities, they unfairly target them for drugs. And it is a shame. And police unfairly target minorities for a lot of crimes. But we don't think that you should legalize the crime, we think you should improve the police forces. Why we think this happens is what we should do is take advantage of the reform efforts that's already happening in police forces. When you say that police should wear body cameras, they should take more training. We should use that as an ability to help individuals that are addicted to marijuana. Because what happens is the poorest individuals, when they're addicted, when they can no longer work, when they can no longer put food on the table, because it is so cheap that they can devolve all of their money to being addicted to something that legitimately prevents them from working, holding down a job, creates gaps in their resume, they can never return to full-time employment, then you need to be able to help these people. But how do you help someone until it's too late? Ben told you the example that you cannot stop an alcoholic until he actually commits a crime, until it's too late because somebody is dead, somebody's life has been ruined. We tell you the alternative is better when you have police that are able to force individuals into rehab. So they charge them a fine if they're too poor to actually pay it. If they're not the rich people that can simply pay it, then they have to opt into rehab programs, which are better for their entire investment because we give them the ability to actually have meaningful change. I'll take Sean.
So, you want to help poor people and help people from being incarcerated by the police, but you just said that if they refuse to pay the fine and refuse to go to rehab, then they will probably end up going to jail. How are you then going to reform the police force when they have the exact same powers you are trying to prevent them from having?
I think it's better to have a system that rather than throwing the book, rather than simply throwing them to jail and then having your system where we don't give them anything at all, we simply allow these people to have the rehabilitation programs that we can put them into. An addict is not someone that wants to check themselves voluntarily into rehab, but that it is the duty of the government when the social contract you talk about has individuals being able to opt into a system that, yes, when they are addicted, when they no longer know their own rights, when they are literally throwing their lives away, we give them an actual opportunity, an actual system where we can make meaningful changes to the government. That's the responsibility we think the government has. Yes.
I think it's great that you think we can somehow build a magical system that changes our criminal justice system. Can you explain what part of the resolution allows you as a negative to defend those actions?
Look, I think at the point that you are saying that it would be preferable to create a certain regulatory system, we also think that throwing everybody in jail is a bad thing and we'd use the money for something better. But let's say you don't buy that weed in and of itself is simply the most addicting thing that is going to lead to all these bad impacts. I also want to talk about what happens to the cartels when you create a legalized environment. Because what happens is studies have shown that cartels turn to harder drugs to push. Because what happens is when you take 1 out of every 4 cartel dollar, and the cartel also has factories producing cocaine and heroin, they ramp up the production to be able to recover the lost profits. They engage in violent activity to secure the market away from each other, from the other rival cartels. We think that is much more problematic to the extent that they are going to be able to push even harder drugs. Studies have shown that a record number of crystal meth has been stopped at the border by U.S. Border Patrol agents, which means even more is getting through to our cities, to our streets. The poorest individuals in our society don't have the ability to combat this. They particularly don't have the ability when you think the best thing for minority communities is to simply eliminate all police departments and all police representation, prevent the ability to actually force people to be able to engage in rehabilitation programs, crash the price of marijuana as statistics have shown in Colorado, and simply lead to harder drugs proliferating in our streets. We're very proud to oppose.
Here, here. Thank you, Manu. Next up in the affirmative from Lee College, Cody Bijou.
First of all, since I just got 10 seconds, I just want to send out a quick thank you very much to JMU. Thank you very much for the invitation. It's an honor to be up here at the final table. Congratulations to the other competitors up here, my allies and the opponents. All of them are wonderful debaters, and just thank you very much, judges, for your attendance in this round, and thank you very much for the audience for just simply being here to watch us debate, because usually we're debating to one person in a room with nobody else. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the round. Okay. First of all, we have to understand that decriminalization from the negative aspect doesn't actually curtail the cartel's role as far as national marijuana is concerned. Prohibition has failed. American usage, they've said, will skyrocket with the legalization of recreational marijuana. However, they just elect to negate the fact that, address the fact that under the status quo, under prohibition, over just the last decade, according to the Pew Research Center in 2013, American usage has increased 26%. Despite hundreds of thousands of dollars being spent towards marijuana-related offenses and billions of dollars towards reducing the marijuana supply and demand in the United States, according to the National Survey on Drug Use and Health by the Office of National Drug Control Policy of 2014, we simply are spending so much money on a battle that isn't being won. When we're talking about the war on drugs, we need to put these resources towards the real crime. 88% of marijuana-related arrests are from those people that only possess them, not from the cartels, not from the distributors, not from the manufacturers. We need to target the actual root of the problem in this war on drugs and stop fighting a battle that we simply aren't winning. We're actually subsidizing the cartels from the current standpoint. By keeping marijuana illegal, our government is simply handing over control of a lucrative market to the violent drug cartels instead of legitimate tax-paying businesses. And remember, according to the negative, these legitimate tax-paying businesses are only making 1/4 of the revenue of what these cartels are making in the 46 states where currently prohibition is upheld. You're giving 4 times the money to cartels on the Mexican border than you are to legitimate tax-paying businesses with the current status quo. If the goal of marijuana prohibition is to subsidize the Mexican drug cartels, well then simply put, prohibition is in fact a success. But we also have to consider product safety, something that isn't being upheld again by the status quo. Prohibition facilitates an environment with no safety regulations for its grossing user base. According to, again, the Pew Research Center of April 2013, 48% of American adults have used marijuana, the highest time reported ever. And yes, negative, College William Mary.
So the reason that 25% of cartel profits are affected is because 3/4 of them are from heroin and cocaine, which they push an even higher level. Why does that change on your side when that's all the cartels can push, and they have to do that to recoup the losses?
As far as the revenue gained from cocaine or any of that stuff, I'm not sure that actually isn't relevant to today's debate. We're talking about the money that they're gaining from marijuana, and that's the issue that I'm talking about targeting right now. Also, whenever we consider quality control, I'll take your question in a minute, we have to understand that whenever we have unregulation, we have negative impacts towards these consumers. Again, an increase in pot poisonings in Washington state has become a concern and are bolstered by marijuana detractors' arguments against legalization, because even though it's medical marijuana, it's actually unregulated and mostly unlicensed. The key to safety is national legalization and national regulation for quality control towards the consumer. The largest spike was actually amongst teenagers as well, judges. So we have to consider that impacting positively our American youth is the stance of the affirmative state, not towards that of prohibition as we currently see. Yes, University of Central Oklahoma.
Back on the issues of cartels, if you are correct about cartels having other sources of income like heroin and cocaine, why then wouldn't post-legalization, when those cartels just shift harder into those other markets to make up for their losses?
As far as the shifting is actually concerned, that's directly negated by the fact that the decreased expenditures that we are going to have through legalization towards marijuana possession and arrest are then going to be able to be reallocated towards increased effectiveness in these other areas. We're simply in order to win the war on drugs, we have to pick our battles. Increasing revenue in these areas, increasing effectiveness and the resources of law enforcement is the key, and that's only going to happen through legalization and regulation of marijuana. When we're talking about the youth, distribution to minors under the status quo, currently 80% of high school seniors report marijuana being easy to obtain, according to the National Institute on Drug Abuse in 2014. And teens report it to be much easier to obtain than nationally legal alternatives such as prescription drugs, cigarettes, and alcohol. Why? Because it's unregulated, and these other areas are regulated and they're kept out of the hands of our youth. Youth represent a quarter of the United States population in 2011, and they depend on the adults in their lives to keep them safe and to help achieve their full potential. This is only going to happen through modeling, through simply addressing reality, understanding that half of these adults have already used it, and just allowing for safety, allowing for education, and allowing for awareness towards these youth, and getting rid of the negative impacts that currently the status quo upholds. And with that, we simply ask for affirmation in today's resolution. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Cody. Next up, to speak in the negative, Rufin Farouk from Southern Methodist University.
Before I begin our rebuttal, I would like to echo the words of everyone on stage today, particularly the James Madison University, the judges, and the audience, but more specifically the Arthur Root Foundation, which in my 8 years of debate has helped me in so many ways, from going to high school nationals to being here today. There have been a lot of things said in this round, and I think what this round needs is clarity. So I'll read the topic again. This House believes that the United States should legalize and regulate marijuana for recreational use. That means the affirmative side has the burden not only to explain why legalization is important, but also to explain what the regulatory regime would look like, a burden that they have not fully met. We begin our negation by providing the following three methods for you to weigh arguments. First, we should look at how the resolution impacts the poor for three reasons. First, the poor represent the highest cost to society in terms of usage of public welfare. Second, the poor have the least economic mobility. And third, the poor have the highest exposure to current drug laws. Second, the context of legalization matters because a recreational marijuana system requires a strong support and infrastructure system. Legalization works differently in middle-class Colorado versus how it works in inner-city Dallas, where SMU is close to. It will not work in the same way in inner cities, which lacks communal police trust, access to credit, and underperforming skills. And finally, we would like to point out to the affirmative side that wisdom lives beyond the walls of the university. The primary purpose of this activity is debate, discourse, and advocacy. There are conflicting messages from the perch of the affirmative. We want to pay attention to what poor, minority communities are telling us. In fact, Stephen Levitt, economist at UChicago, says marijuana usage destroys an entire generation of African Americans. Not this time, sir. In fact, we see that marijuana usage has rampaged these communities and has incredibly negative harms. And the only way legalization works is to increase the amount of addictive users. In fact, Mark Kleiman, who who consults the state of Washington with legalization, says the only way to sell a lot of pot is to create a lot of potheads, not casual, moderate recreational users, but chronic, multiple joints per day zombies. I encourage the act to look beyond the ivory tower and the reality on the ground. Yes?
On our side, we have government dispensaries that can take stock of just how much marijuana someone is consuming, meaning we can reach the hardest cases of addiction directly. How do you reach those people?
Great, I will continue my speech and get to that. So what we are advocating is we need reform, and we stand for reform, not transformation in the system. First, there are limits to freedom and choice. Rule of law, property rights, and individual choices when they harm society as a large have always played a role in telling us where we can draw the red line. The way we deal with things like health programs, rehabilitation, is we stand for medical marijuana and decriminalization, but we draw the line at legalization, not at this time, sir. In fact, The Economist magazine in 2014 points out that there is a strong difference between legalization and decriminalization. Decriminalization says you can smoke marijuana, but the fines and the penalties will not be as large for it. Legalization legalizes the entire system, and there seems to be a myopic, utopian understanding on the affirmative side of how drug cartels would react to legalization. Drug cartels have a vested interest to remain in the system. To somehow think that overnight they would be removed from the system is simply not true, not at this time. Removal will create costs and it will be violent. This will not be a smooth transition. And where will be the grounds for this violence? In the very poor minority communities that the affirmative says they protect. In fact, we will have huge savings from reforming drug laws, lower enforcement costs and prison costs that we can redistribute to many of the health benefit systems that they discuss. I think I'm at 4 minutes, so I'll continue. And so another thing we have here is the point on organized crime. That legalization would be harmful for the entire system. There would be a retrenchment of cartels and drug-related activity, but also there are going to be additional harms in the system. Beyond the contested health benefits or costs of marijuana, we see that there are huge downturns in economic productivity, because once you're addicted, you simply can't work. And there's uncertainty in gray areas, specifically when it comes to what happens to police who are one day on the streets, cops one day arresting people for marijuana usage, and the next day, as the New Yorker puts it, high-fiving people for marijuana usage, especially in vulnerable minority communities. And so finally, I think we can all agree today that this is a contested topic on health benefits, on costs, on drug cartels. But Mark Kleiman says, who again is the consultant for Washington and legalization, legalization at best is a heavy wager on a coin flip, and we do not create transformative federal policy on a coin flip when there's so much uncertainty affecting tens of millions of people. You have to oppose this resolution.
Thank you, Rufus. Next up, to speak in the affirmative, Reagan Dobbs from Lee College.
Okay. All right, well, I have a lot of thank yous to go through. First of all, of course, to my coach for making this possible. Thank you to my partner, just for being the best partner in the world, and of course, getting us here. Thank you to everyone that was involved in the process here, just everything at James Madison University for the beautiful campus, all the way up to just making sure that this tournament has run smoothly. It's done a wonderful job so far. I think we can all agree that it's just absolutely wonderful to be here. And that being said, we have some marijuana to talk about, so I'm just going to go straight into it. Okay. The first thing we're going to talk about is decriminalization proposed by the negative and regulation. Something that my partner talked about is that decriminalization doesn't affect the cartel. First of all, it's not going to help anything at home because it doesn't account for regulation just whenever we're looking within our borders, and it doesn't actually have the cartel. Like, the cartel doesn't have to abide by our laws, especially whenever they're not even within our country. So we have to understand that to begin with. And they make this claim that we can only actually affect it, like with the example for alcohol, we can only actually get these guys after they committed a crime. And that's that's completely untrue. Something that every affirmative speech has talked about so far is redistributing these funds and educating that system. So we can actually prevent these issues before they even become a big deal. We can reallocate these funds. According to a Harvard economist, Jeffrey Miron, from September 2014, treating marijuana as a legally regulated commodity would yield $7.7 billion annually nationwide. This is money we can redistribute so we can actually combat the cartel. Of course, the negative is going to talk about how they're pushing other drugs, like they're pushing heroin, they're pushing methamphetamine, whatever the case may be. But this is something we can actually already solve for with legalization when we're looking at this. We can choose our battle. Whenever we see that only 88% of marijuana arrests are only for possession, not even a violent crime, we can see there are other bigger fish to fry and other issues to deal with.
So you say on the affirmative side of the House that under legalization, education programs will prevent marijuana abuse from occurring. But after marijuana was legalized in Colorado, rates of abuse increased more than 20% in less than a year. So how do you explain that discrepancy?
Whenever we're looking at this, actually towards the education system, we actually saw a decrease in use amongst our youth, which is actually where most of our education system is actually being placed. And I think that's the biggest area of emphasis that we need to look at in today's round, is looking at our youth when we're considering this. They actually saw a decrease in that youth usage, so that's the biggest thing. In just a moment. Whenever we're looking at this, they talk about we're basically going to be treating addicts right now. We're going to educate these, and we're just going to prevent these issues from even happening in the future. The biggest thing that we have to look at right after this is the previous negative speech said that this actually provides a decrease in productivity, but I don't know if that's actually true. This is simply a claim without a warrant. They just said, oh, it decreases productivity, but there was no information on this if it's even happened in several states. And I know there's information that could be there about it because we have 4 states that actually legalized the use of recreational marijuana, and they didn't bring up anything like that, so we don't even know if this is a significant cost right here. Just like my partner was saying, Cody, 80% of high school seniors actually report being extremely easy to obtain. Like they could get it within a half hour if they were actually going to use this. And this is because it isn't regulated, because the black market just provides a very, very simple alternative to alcohol and to cigarettes or painkillers, whatever the case may be. Just like my partner was saying again, youth represents about 1/4 of our population, and they actually depend on the adults in their lives to keep them safe. Through the legalization and regulation of marijuana, this holds our adults and our legislators accountable for what actually happens in the nation. The affirmative side will not tolerate abuse on this part. The affirmative side will not tolerate the use of illegal drugs among our youth, and it will not tolerate these types of things hurting them before they even get a chance to be of the age of consent to actually deal with these things. Through the legalization of marijuana, we are better able to educate our youth and focus on their social and emotional well-being. Yes. The first.
I apologize for, I feel like you should be able to take a little bit more time for that. So the point that you crash the price, you put a government seal telling these people it's okay, and then you're becoming dependent on the government revenue to fund programs. How are you not pushing the drug on the very people you should be helping get off of drugs and dependency?
We actually wouldn't be doing this actually wouldn't be happening in the long term. I mean, just like the negative said, I mean, this actually would kind of depend on a couple of the addicts that we have right now, but we're definitely not going to depend on addicts for the rest of the legalization of marijuana if this actually were to be proposed and accepted by the judges today from the affirmative side. In the short term, absolutely, it does depend on the addicts right now, but this is going to be rehabilitated. We're going to fix this issue. We're going to educate our youth and prevent this problem from happening in the future. So that's how that's actually going to be addressed. Whenever we're looking at this, the issue is that 88% of these arrests aren't even violent crimes. They're completely non-violent. And if we're putting them in prisons, we're just teaching them how to become better criminals because they're going to be with the harder guys like the rapists and the murderers and those that are actually involved in violent crime. Because police and prosecutors make lousy doctors whenever we're looking at this, rehabilitation is actually key. And because jailers make even worse doctors, rehabilitation is going to be key in this, in the present time where we are going to deal with addicts and preventing our youth from becoming addicts in the end. For all of these reasons, we strongly urge the affirmative side of this, and I'll stand down.
Thank you, Reagan. Next up to speak in the negative, Arvind Venkatamaran from Southern Methodist University.
And so before I begin, like to touch on the fact that debate is an activity that celebrates the First Amendment right to freedom of discourse. I'd just like to thank James Madison, not only the namesake of this university, for supporting the First Amendment, but also for the university in supporting open discourse, especially on such a sensitive topic as the one that we're discussing today. To crystallize the arguments that have been made in this round, we must first look to the burden that my partner placed on the affirmative, which is to prove that legalization and regulation will minimize the harms and maximize benefits. As the negative, what we've shown is that this simply is not the case. From looking at the framework that we provided as the negative, we've seen that legalization of recreational marijuana, as opposed to decriminalization, has disproportionate harms on the poorest in our society. And for the three reasons that we should look to the resolution, because the poor represent the highest cost to society, highest terms of usage of public welfare, least mobility, and the highest exposure to drug laws, we must pick the solution that has the greatest impact on the lowest socioeconomic rung in our society, and policy of decriminalization achieves these benefits. First, what we have to understand is that a policy of legalization does not decrease the demand in marijuana usage. The affirmative side has talked a lot about how legalization of marijuana will minimize public harms by making it open in a free market structure. Yes, I'll take your questions.
All of the harms to the poor are equally done by alcohol and tobacco. Why can you justify keeping them legal on your side?
Yeah, so I'd say the prime example of this is the argument of rehabilitation versus prevention. While in a system of legalization, there may be resources allocated towards rehabilitation, what it does not accomplish is the prevention and education against the initial usage. And according to a study by the National Institute of Health in 2011, they found that adolescents in low socioeconomic areas that consumed marijuana were 17% more likely to drop out of school, had lower IQ points, and were more likely to go to jail for a nonviolent offense. I'll take a question from University of Houston.
How does a policy of decriminalization, which makes it so that marijuana is no longer illegal, change those statistics?
Yes, the way it changes those statistics is that decriminalization removes the criminal offense, but it allows for the continuation of resources to go into preventative care and to change that criminal offense into a policy of rehabilitation, so that we're solving the problem from both rungs of that area. And I can take a follow-up.
Where do you get these resources for preventative care from if you just decriminalize marijuana?
Yeah, and so it's from two places. The first is from the DEA, which allocates $24 billion towards education and eradication efforts. Then the other is from the White House's National Drug Policy, which allocates additional government resources towards education and especially towards parent education. I'll take another question from Rutgers.
When you change it to just something where you add fines and citations, aren't you now creating a financial incentive for police to prey on these communities, while before there was a financial disincentive of jailing them?
Absolutely not. If anything, there's a financial incentive in a legal market because you have an open commercial entity that's able to sell marijuana for personal use, rather than a decriminalized society where for medical purposes or purposes where an individual needs to use the substance, they still can. To continue forward with my speech, to touch on a point that my partner brought up, and this is the issue of government trust. If we legalize, we create a legal gray area where the government is inconsistent in their policies of preventing future drug use, education on drug use, and a complete turnaround where police forces that were once enforcing a policy are now turning a blind eye to what was formerly an illegal action. And what this creates is prevention of progress in other aspects of social policy. And then what we must then look into is the other health harms of addiction, the drop in IQ, and the other psychological harms I mentioned, and the social harms in exposing the low aspects of socioeconomic rungs to marijuana. And I'll take another question from Rutgers.
If any of your arguments about government trust were true, then why aren't we seeing them in Washington, D.C., and Washington State and Colorado where they are legal?
Yeah, and so I guess in Colorado and Washington, it's too soon to have definitive data to make kind of cross-sectional claims. What we have seen in both of those cases is that there are exaggerated instances where individuals have gotten into health harms through drug driving or through adolescents gaining access. To touch on kind of a more macro argument against legalization is the issue of cartels. And what we can see is that organized crime is not going to sit a blind eye to a legal market. It's not going to return from a black market to white market. As the climate evidence that my partner brought up also stated, is that the black market is a paper tiger that needs a push. In the long run, a legal market may displace any of the harms that the organized crime market has, but in the short run, when such a large percentage of revenue for organized crime is coming from marijuana sales, there are going to be significant harms in the black market's displacement, which becomes an issue as to why we must negate this resolution.
Thank you, Armin. Next up to speak in the affirmative, Joshua Freed from the University of Houston.
All right. My mom taught me that nothing's more honest than a concise thank you, so thank you. So let me go ahead. All right. I'm going to talk about three things that have been talked about in this debate. And first is the difference between abuse and use in moderation. Much of the evidence from the negative side about schizophrenia, about suicide, about all these individual harms come from the abuse of marijuana, not its use in moderation. For instance, the rat studies that were mentioned, the IQ studies that were mentioned, those are based on abuse, especially in teens. Notice that teen use of marijuana is illegal in both the negative world and the affirmative world. In fact, in the affirmative world, where we legalize marijuana and increase regulations, we're better able to prevent these teens from using and abusing it. Therefore, we end up solving for some of those harms to IQ. One other interesting thing about that IQ study is that they found that in adults, marijuana doesn't decrease or increase IQ at all. So the only harmful effects from marijuana come in youth use. So the question is going to be, which side does a better job at preventing that? Second, and rather one last word on moderation. Think of it a bit like alcohol. Medical studies show that a glass of wine can be beneficial for lifespan. It has antioxidants that increases health, so on and so forth. Moderation isn't harmful. It's the abuse and consistent substance abuse of things like this that actually cause these harms. So if we're doing a better job of preventing that and creating education programs to get you to not do this, then obviously we're solving this problem better. Yes?
Isn't it rather naive to think that private players who have a strong profit incentive won't do marketing, advertising, increase the potency of drugs to increase usage amongst the most vulnerable, including adolescents that you mentioned?
Okay, so first of all, that's why the resolution asks us to prove both legalization and regulation. One thing that so far the negative has missed is that the affirmative wants to regulate the industry. In these regulations, it can have rules about advertising and how corporations act. They're able to advertise towards youth in a similar way that they do with tobacco. You're not allowed to advertise explicitly to youth for alcohol or tobacco. So because we support these regulations, we actually help solve for that problem a little bit. But second, onto the issue of cartels, which has been discussed quite a bit. Prohibition is actually a pretty decent example of this, for alcohol specifically. When we made alcohol illegal, mobs and cartels arose and became violent because it was illegal. The proof for that is that after alcohol was made legal again, these mobs and cartels dissolved. We create the violence by making it illegal. I'll take another question.
So, given the mental health studies that you cite say that there are adverse psychological harms until the mid-20s, if you have education programs on your side, but unlike our side, you can't mandate people go to them, and the marijuana is cheaper, and the government is saying it's healthy, and there's a greater social norm, how do you actually get people to stop being addicted into these programs?
So the first issue I take with the question is you're still not considering the rest of the regulations that we have as the affirmative. You're placing us in a world where we just legalize and step back with our hands out. We do have regulation and we do have these educational programs, which again we're funding through economic benefits that we list. In the negative world, there is no such framework, and we're the only people providing the framework for this to be solved. Moving on to that issue of cartels once again. Peter Hakeem, President Emeritus at the Inter-American Dialogue, states that legalization would contribute to easier relations with Mexico and other nations and neighbors on that south on issues of public security. Legalization will also lift an unneeded burden from U.S. foreign policy in Latin America, where Washington's drug war has long strained diplomatic relations. At the point where Latin American countries are begging us to shift our focus from marijuana because it hasn't been effective, and they're struggling to fight the actual drug war and the actual drugs that are harmful, like heroin, methamphetamines, crack cocaine, so on and so forth. I could list them all day long. At the point where they're begging us to legalize marijuana and stop focusing so much on a relatively harmless drug so that we can give them the funds and cooperate and unify together to address the actual drug war, it's a requirement for us to do so, and we should do so. Not only does it benefit our relationship with all of our neighbors in Latin America, but it also allows us to unify and address the actual drug war, which we're not doing because we spend so much time focusing on marijuana, which, as we've shown, is relatively harmless when used in moderation. It's only in abuse that all of these harms happen. I'd like to spend one last moment talking about all of the benefits that the affirmative side lists. For starters, there's the economic benefits and the social programs. These 4,000 students that get to go to college because of these taxes, these 900 police officers that can be funded, those are real impacts. But one last one on social justice. We learned from Ferguson that police officers are willing to target African Americans and the poor just to make money off of their backs in fines and fees. The negative creates a framework of incentivizing these police officers to arrest poor people, to arrest African Americans, because they can fine them for using marijuana even though it's not technically illegal. And because they create this incentive, they effectively undermine every step they try to take towards social justice. And because all of this, you must affirm the resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Joshua. Next up, to speak in the negative, Jasmine Stidham from the University of Central Oklahoma.
All right, well first I would also like to thank some people at UCO. First is Dean Stewart at the College of Liberal Arts, the Office of Student Affairs, and President Betts. Of course, thank you to JMU for hosting, and to all the tournament participants, and also the judges. Now, let's begin because I have a lot to say. First, I will begin on the issue of usage because I think it frames every other portion of the debate. I will isolate a few reasons as to why the affirmative will absolutely increase usage. First, availability. The more available a substance, the greater number of users, and conversely, the less available a substance, the less number of users. The important thing to remember when evaluating this particular argument is to understand that the AF also increases access points. Because just because some people use marijuana in the status quo does not also mean that the AF also doesn't make it easier to procure marijuana. The second argument is the perception of risk. A survey done in New Jersey and California of students over 20 years ago revealed that they did not do drugs then because they were so afraid of getting in trouble. The reason why usage has increased is because we are starting to tolerate and normalize smoking marijuana, and the AF drastically increases that sort of normalization. These are all logically warranted arguments that prove how the affirmative will assuredly lead to more harm and abuse because they normalize it. Next is the issue of decriminalization. While the negative does not need to win that decriminalization would be a necessary better regime, you should still evaluate it as being an alternative to the affirmative's full-fledged legalization. I want this to be clear. It is only the burden of the negative to prove that the AF does not solve the harms that they outlined in their case, but either way, you can still vote negative on decriminalization or just on the sole fact that the AF does not solve. Decriminalization would sufficiently solve because we would still keep the law in the books so we could utilize rehabilitation services which require it to be legal and also would not skyrocket usage. We can also prosecute cartels and other people because the law would still remain on the books. It's intro to law, one-on-one. Question, Rutgers.
So your argument for increased usage is the normalization of marijuana usage. Doesn't that also cause normalization when you decriminalize marijuana and make it a speeding ticket instead of a class 1 drug?
Not necessarily, because you are opening up government-induced dispensaries which are fundamentally distinct. Now, I'll move on to the issue of cartels. First, there's no way the affirmative is going to be solved for the issues in places like Mexico or other places in Latin America because it just doesn't make any sort of logical sense. Mexico does not have a drug problem. Mexico has an institutional problem. According to Alejandro Hope, that institutions are too weak to protect the life, liberty, and property of its citizens. Additionally, marijuana is not worth enough. According to Hope, the director of security policy at the Mexican Institute for Competitiveness, the illegal marijuana trade only represents no more than 1/3 of the market, which means that it only makes sense that cartels would shift into other markets like heroin and cocaine harder because they would have to make up for those losses. You should think of cartels like investors. When you have a stock portfolio and one of your stocks collapses overnight, you don't stop investing altogether because that would be silly. You look to your other stocks in your portfolio and then invest more capital there. Question.
At the point where we both agree that cartels are harmful, but Latin American countries are all asking us to redirect our focus and legalize marijuana so that we are better able together to address the actual harms of cartels, from cocaine and heroin and all those other hard drugs that you just listed. Why shouldn't we agree with them and listen to them and legalize so that we can better unify to attack the issue that we all agree is so important?
Sure, I wonder what source you're referring to. I would be really interested to hear that somewhere in another speech as to which Latin American countries are specifically asking what they're asking for. So I'm sure we'll hear about that in your next speech. At this point, it seems pretty irrelevant. Now I'll talk about the issue of the FDA. I know the first F sounded quite convincing when you explained that the FDA would be better than the cartels, but the F also has to win. The FDA is an effective regime, an effective sort of bureaucracy to successfully monitor and regulate marijuana. The FDA is overburdened. There is no way they'll be able to monitor every single bag of weed purchased, especially because the industry is going to capture the marijuana industry that is likely to come up. If they are correct about marijuana being so profitable and really attractive, that just means the industry is going to turn into things like big tobacco, where they are not going to be able to control regulation because they will lobby so hard, which means that the government will have no capacity to monitor whatsoever, which means they will also increase the black market. There's this argument the affirmative is making is also extremely naive, because there's no reason why people are all of a sudden going to switch to a government-branded sort of marijuana when they can just go to their dealer down the street and get it for cheaper, and also it'll probably be better. Next, on the issue of racism. Obviously, we all agree that racism is a terrible social injustice and deserves our attention, but the affirmative's approach is infinitely worse and is really wishful thinking for a couple reasons. Discrimination will not end once we legalize marijuana. The act will just cause a shift for what black people are policed for. This is especially true because in order for there to be a legal market, there also has to be an illegal market, and you know who's going to populate the illegal market? Black people who are not going to have access to actually facilitating dispensaries, because people are going to do that are going to be rich white people who have the ability to invest in those sort of things, which means that you should not vote affirmative because doing so is an investment in an inherently naive policy, and there is absolutely no reason why you should be faithful to an advocacy that does not have any empirical evidence behind it.
Thank you, Jasmine. Now for the final speaker in the affirmative, Tanwir Rajwani from the University of Houston.
Hello, everybody. My name is Tanwir Rajwani. I'm from the University of Houston. I'd like to thank all of you for being here. I know y'all have been thanked plenty, but it's truly a pleasure to debate in front of an audience, which, to be honest, I don't really get a lot. So with that, I guess I'll begin. I'd like to start with a quote that Obama recently made regarding marijuana legalization. He said that one of the great victories of this country has been our ability to reduce incidences of smoking, increase seatbelt use. We save hundreds of thousands of lives every single year. We didn't throw anybody into jail. We just made sure that they were well informed, and if somebody had an addiction, we made sure that we made it easy for them to get help. I think the point he was trying to make here is that when we legalize marijuana, it's not that we just stop throwing people to jail, but we provide them with the resources that are necessary to mitigate the harms that the negative side has pointed out that are sometimes associated with marijuana. Now, a few of the reasons we think that you should affirm the resolution, you should legalize and regulate marijuana, is because first, again, some of the philosophical aspects of Rutgers flew over my head, but I agree with their social justice claims that marijuana, the policies that we have right now are racist. They target specifically people of color disproportionately. Again, some of the arguments that Lee College made about cartels we think are very important, that marijuana is a pretty big funding source for cartels, but not only that, when we get rid of marijuana as a roadblock for DEA agents, they can focus more on the harder drugs like crack cocaine, which which are more profitable for cartels, and therefore it's a better idea for us to target those drugs instead. But lastly, because of economics, again, marijuana legalization makes us a lot of money. Colorado, Washington, they're making a lot of money. So I think it's beneficial economically, in an economic sense, for us to legalize marijuana. But a few of the arguments they've made, they say that to negate the resolution somehow means that you support decriminalization. I don't think that's true. Look, if it looks like a joint, smells like a joint, and gets you as high as a joint, it's probably a joint. Decriminalization is legalization. If you make something that's illegal, legal, or no longer illegal, that's the same thing as making or legalizing it. The only problem is that regulations don't follow decriminalizations. So you don't get your budgets because there aren't any market regulations, so you're not making money off of that marijuana. You're not stopping the cartels because it makes it easier for cartels to funnel marijuana into the states because they're no longer illegal. And then ultimately it just harms more people. So this is why it's necessary for you to legalize it with regulations. Now, they make a health argument. The abuse, I guess, you shouldn't really punish anyone for the abuse. You shouldn't ban a substance for the potential abuse of it. Otherwise, sugar would be banned. Tobacco would be banned. Alcohol should be banned. They say that it would drop IQ. I'm not sure where they got this study from. Obama smoked marijuana, and he's a very intelligent man, so I'm not sure. I don't think it drops IQ. And again, they haven't cited a single statistic that shows that marijuana kills people. There have been 0 deaths from marijuana usage. But things that are legal, such as alcohol, tobacco, they kill people every day, so why keep marijuana illegal? Now, they make an argument about usage, how legalizing marijuana increases usage. This argument would be cool and all if they won an argument or a reason why usage of marijuana is bad. If marijuana usage isn't bad, then it doesn't matter if marijuana usage increases. That's why we're legalizing it. We want people to use it. Now, cartel shift. I think they misunderstand the cartel's argument my partner was making. By the way, the author's name is Peter Hakeem, which my partner read. The argument is that countries, it's not a matter of funding. Yes, cartels are diversified in other drugs, but it's a matter of focus. Where does the DEA focus their resources? Right now it's on marijuana. When we legalize marijuana, then they focus more on the harder drugs such as cocaine, methamphetamines. Lastly, a lot of the harms that they have pointed out, such as health effects, regulations solve those because we can regulate what kind of marijuana is distributed. And with that, I'd like to wish you all a happy 420 and thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you, Tim. Next up, Tess Botkin, giving the final negative speech from the University of Central California.
Before I begin, I, like everyone else, would like to thank people. However, I'm going to break from the mold. In addition to thanking JMU, I want to thank a very important reason why I'm here, which are my coaches, Dr. Matthew Moore, Shay Bunis, and my former coach, Kurt Fafelsky. Without them, I would not be here having this invaluable experience that has not only increased the college experience, but the skills that I will take outward. I also want to thank all of my teammates, those who are here and those who are not, because without them, the debate would not be the joyful place that I willingly spend hours of my life dedicated to. And with that, I would like to move on to this important topic, which we are negating. The affirmative says a lot of pretty statements that make legalizing marijuana sound like something that is good. However, the reality is that legalizing marijuana is not something that is testable in the current environment. They have a lot of arguments about why this would work, but there's not a proven mechanism that actually solves things like regulations, racism, or other institutional factors that they would not be able to benefit. Let's talk about the cartels for a second. Their argument is that cartels would no longer have the main source of revenue. However, I would like to point out what Jasmine said. Cartels only have 1/3 of revenue, which is allocated for marijuana. This alone does not translate into the same amount of police forces, which directly counters all of your arguments about the DEA. The reason the DEA is successful right now in bringing down cartels is because they know how these cartels works when it comes to trafficking marijuana. I guarantee you the way that you traffic a white powder and a green substance that you can smell from a mile away is completely different in terms of how you get that across a border. The DEA would have to change their entire strategy, not to mention probably suffer funding cuts if we thought there was going to be some decrease in violence, which means that they would no longer be as effective. They have not answered this argument that cartels will just shift and diversify their interests to things like human trafficking or harder drugs. Even if the drug problem is solved in this instance, they have not touched on the fact that when cartels feel the need to diversify their interests, they just look to traffic humans, increase kidnappings of people from other countries that go down to Mexico, and get money that way. This is not something that magically goes away when we legalize marijuana. It increases, because when you make a criminal organization desperate that is very dependent on the type of money from illicit activities, they will only increase their illicit activities even more in the scramble. This is not to mention the amount of countless Mexican citizens and American citizens that will be harmed when these cartels start to lash out at each other, and we have no idea what their game plan is, because we will unite the cartels with a common goal of finding a way to get their revenue back, because we have just taken it all away. This is not a reason that they solve with legalization. It is a net reason why they make the problem worse. Now let's talk about this argument that weed is not inherently harmful. Whether or not you read the studies or not, or whether or not you agree, that does not mean that you cannot vote negative. We have the external impact of cartels, and also a reason why they don't solve. Legalization does not do anything to solve the things they are talking about. Even if they make some sort of economic profit that only trades off with the things that they are going to have to spend the money on, like rehabilitation and education programs, which I point out they have never answered that people in lower minority communities who are the most affected by this type of argument will probably be the ones who do not get this education in the first place, because racism still exists post the affirmative, which brings me on to the final part of their argument. Look, they do not have a magic wand that solves racism. They are creating a symptom of the problem. They are not solving the problem itself. And what happens is that they assuage a bunch of white people who now think that racism is over. Look, the government did something. We stopped people from getting arrested for weed. Well, I'm sorry, that's not good enough. And if you think that we should allow these people to assuage their guilt and move on, it is not only immoral, it is irrational to assume that this would somehow lead to a better law or a change in the way that we treat people of color. Instead of focusing on legalizing a drug that doesn't do anything to benefit people, just gives them the right to get high, we should spend this energy working on changing the way that law enforcement policies are enacted and the way that our judicial system unjustly submits people of color to a standard that they do not submit white individuals to. What happens when they legalize marijuana is that a bunch of people stop caring because they can go roll a joint in the back of their car. Well, I'm sorry, I think we should be focusing on human rights abuses that are occurring in our country, not the fact that some people want to get high. So that's why you vote negative.
Thank you very much, Jess. At this time, the jury will deliberate. While they're deliberating, we're going to invite the audience to make floor speeches and ask questions, I believe.